And when they arrived, they were in excruciating pain in the left ear. Now, just a bit of a background. So the patient was fully aware that they had earwax in their right ear, which is the second ear. If you stay tuned, you'll see that, for about 5 years. They went on holiday and they got water in the ear, and that's when they noticed that they weren't able to hear from the right side. So they performed the cardinal sin of using cotton buds, and they really impacted the wax in their right ear. Now, with the right ear, although the patient was hardly able to hear, and it's been 5 years, the patient did inform me of that, it wasn't painful, and it was only a couple of weeks ago that they also got water in their left ear and used a cotton bud in their left ear. And it was the left ear really that triggered the patient to seek help. So the patient's girlfriend is an avid viewer of mine on social media, and she told her partner, you must go and get to myself and get this sorted. And upon arrival, it was very apparent the patient was really struggling to hear me. Extremely, you can tell that when I was asking questions, it was kind of just nodding, pretending to hear me, if you like. And the patient did pre-warn me, said the left ear was extremely painful this morning, even on the way to see me. They travelled a bit of a distance to see me. So this left ear was so difficult because as soon as I made contact with the wax, the patient just found it so painful. And you can see how impacted this wax is in the ear. It's right up against the eardrum, and so I've put some olive oil drops just to loosen this. Now, they have been using some drops. I forgot to ask what type. Well, I did ask what type of drops, but I think the patient heard me, and I've got a feeling it was probably hydrogen peroxide-based drops, because hydrogen peroxide turns the wax into this mashed potato consistency, and it's very hard to sometimes suction in a large piece. So I just put loads of olive oil in, and a couple of times I did have to come out of the ear because the patient was just finding it really uncomfortable. And I think at one stage the patient did actually say, Jesus Christ, it's really uncomfortable for me. And you can see that we're just being so gentle. We're not putting any pressure on the wax. We're just trying to kiss the surface. Unfortunately, as audiologists in the UK, we're not able to use any local anaesthesia. So lidocaine, for example, it can be topical like a cream or an injection, which can kind of temporarily numb the ear, which allows obviously ENT to remove wax from someone who's experiencing pain. Now you'll see why the patient is finding this uncomfortable once I remove the plug. They've got a bit of a swelling in the anterior recess. It's not on the eardrum, but there's obviously been some bleeding there, and there's a blister, a boil, which will settle down, of course, now. And this is really lodged, so we're working right on the eardrum, and where we are now, that's what we call an isthmus, the narrowing of the ear canal near to the eardrum. And I've just managed to wriggle this out, and the patient got quite emotional actually when I did. I could tell just how much of a difference it made to him. It got a bit teary actually, and he was very grateful. And you'll see here to the left, you'll see that swelling. We call that the anterior recess. So the anterior part of the ear canal means the front part. So in the case of the left ear, the front part is the left-hand side, and it's right near the eardrum. And so there's obviously been bleeding there, and the patient's just really pushed this in. So the patient's fully aware never to use cotton buds again. And it just made a remarkable difference. It was actually a really enjoyable procedure in the sense where obviously I've had patients before who are very grateful and very emotional, of course, but this patient probably more than any other showed that emotion, and it was a young chap. For a young chap to become very emotional, it says a lot, really. So this is complete. We're just mopping up around the edge, and now we're on the right side. So this has been there for 5 years. I immediately put drops in because it was all slushy and mushy, and again it's right up against the eardrum, and the patient was experiencing some discomfort in this side as well, but nowhere near to the degree he was in the left side. And it's just so difficult because when you've got wax like this, imagine, just to make the comparison of this being wet mud just slapped on a wall, or plaster or cement, wet cement slapped on the wall. And I don't know how the depth of this, so we're just making contact, we're just kissing the surface of this, because if you poke the suction probe in a bit too far, we might be hitting the eardrum directly and perforating it. And the idea for me, again, it's just, I just want to see this patient's eardrum. I just want to make sure they can hear. Now, sometimes with a plug like this, if you go around the edge, you can peel it, but it's just too soft and wet and mushy, and that's not happening. I am suctioning some of this wet wax. You can see how loose and stodgy it is, but it's not coming out in a big lump. And in fact, every time I'm putting the suction probe in, it's almost making an impression, an indentation to the wax. So I'm just going to the back canal wall, just kind of almost sparring with the ear. I'm just trying to see if there's a weak point in this, and if I can lift a bit of wax off the canal, does it peel all of it off? Does it come out in a big blob? But unfortunately it's not. So I think I'm going to put some more drops in. I think I used drops on several occasions, and I just don't know how deep the eardrum is here. I know we're near the eardrum, it's very obvious by the ear anatomy, but even if I go overshoot a millimetre, we're going to be podding and poking right on the patient's eardrum, and I remember they're already in pain. And I think you're just going to see the eardrum there. And at this point, the patient once more was just overwhelmed and says, "You don't know how I feel. I've not been able to hear like this for 5 years." I did joke with the patient, said, "I'm going to make you temporarily hard of hearing again because I'm going to dose you with some drops." And so we had the patient tilted. So this is the right ear is facing almost the ceiling. And whilst the drops were in the ear, I was still continuing to perform microsuction. So we can see the back part of the eardrum now. So that's the blue tinge. So there's some wax. Now this is lodged in the anterior recess. I think I've had to put drops at a couple more occasions to remove this. I'm just going to the top. Again, I'm just looking for a weak spot. I'm just thinking, if I peel some at the top, will the rest of it come out? So I've just got another slither off there. Now you probably saw the eardrum move when I removed that bit. You can see the hammer bone. So you can see the eardrum, the blue tinge, and just in the middle is that pink part, and that's the hammer bone. And when I took that last piece of wax off the drum, the hammer bone did move. So with suction, obviously we are vacuuming, and it can, if you're over aggressive, you can actually suction out. It's never happened before. I can only imagine that'll only happen if someone's got a really weak eardrum, but I do know of an ENT surgeon that's told me before these things can happen. You can suction, and if they've got a weak spot on the eardrum, it can perforate the eardrum. So we're just going to be really gentle. So I'm using the fine end suction probe now, and you can see there's a little movement there now. So it is slowly but surely working itself off the eardrum. So it's kind of 3/4 we can see. It's just the northeast region. So again, this is in the anterior recess. So in the right ear, the anterior recess to the right. And you'll be quite surprised when I remove this. You'll be quite shocked how much is hiding in the anterior recess. So I'm just looking for a suction grip. I'm just making contact with the wax. Now you can see there's loads of oil that I've put in there to help lubricate this, because it is stuck to the eardrum, and I don't want to cause any trauma to the eardrum. So you can see I'm getting this off the anterior. It's a huge piece of wax that was hidden there. You would never imagine there was that much wax hidden away. And you can see even now, even with all these drops, the fine end suction probe is just making an impression. It's imprinting itself on the wax. You probably saw a little circle there, which is mimicking the suction tip. So I have loosened this more or less. I'm just going to bring it out. Now I'm not trying to remove every little last speck of wax. I just want to see this patient's eardrum. Even at this point, patient can hear, I'm happy with it. But I'm just going to mop up a bit, but we're on the bony part. Everything else would naturally migrate. I know there's a lot of viewers that they get a bit frustrated or even angry at times when people like myself, we leave a little bit of wax in the ear. The wax is good for you. It's not going to do any harm. It's naturally going to come out on its own accord. The patient can hear. That's the main thing now. But again, I'm just hovering over. If it's going to come out easily, brilliant. It's all a bonus, but it's not. It's kind of, as I said, the patient's been using some, obviously with water as well. Even with water in the ear, it can